Your destiny is reflecting in the chrome surfaces of the future, waiting for you to step up and claim it. Explore the powerful stories of those who took control of their fate and changed everything. Click subscribe now and start building your own cinematic legacy.
Restocking the front display case when my phone buzzed against my apron pocket. It was a text from my uncle, signed everything yesterday. Keys are in the mail. Thanks for being understanding, sweetheart. I read it twice. Then I set my phone face down on the counter, finished arranging the croissants, and said out loud to nobody in particular, "Good thing I already talked to an attorney 6 weeks ago." The woman waiting for her latte looked up at me. "Sorry," I said. "Long week." She nodded like she understood. She didn't. Nobody really would, unless they'd spent 3 years watching someone slowly dismantle everything your grandfather built, piece by piece, with a smile on their face the whole time. My grandfather, I'll call him Grandpa Lou, started his print shop in 1987. Nothing glamorous. Business cards, flyers, wedding programs, the occasional banner for a car dealership. He built it from a single machine in a rented garage into a real storefront with 4 employees and a loyal client base that had been with him for decades. When I was little, I used to sit on the stool behind the front counter and sort paper samples by color. He'd let me name the shades: dusty peach, library gray, almost cream. He wasn't a rich man, but he had built something. And he was proud of it in the quiet way that people who actually work for things tend to be proud. My grandmother passed when I was 19. After that, Grandpa Lou's health started its slow, uneven decline, nothing dramatic at first. Some memory lapses, fatigue. He started needing rides to appointments. He gave up driving before the doctor told him to, which tells you something about the kind of man he was. My uncle, my mother's younger brother. I'll call him my uncle throughout because that's what he is to me, even if he stopped acting like family a long time ago. Stepped in around that time. He'd always been around on the edges of things, borrowed money here and there, never quite had his feet under him. But when Grandpa Lou needed help, my uncle showed up with a calendar and a casserole and an expression like he was auditioning for a role. My mother lives 4 states away. I'm the one who stayed local. I visited Grandpa Lou twice a week, helped with groceries, drove him to his cardiologist. I knew his neighbors by name. I knew which pharmacist he liked and which one talked too fast. My uncle knew that Grandpa Lou owned a building. That's really what the story is about. The print shop was inside a building that Grandpa Lou also owned. Ground floor commercial, 2 small apartments on the 2nd floor that he rented out. Nothing that would make the news. But in our city, in that neighborhood, it was worth somewhere in the range of $400,000. Maybe more depending on the year and who you asked. When Grandpa Lou's health got serious enough that he couldn't manage the shop anymore, he brought in a business attorney to set up a trust. This was about 3 years ago. I was 28. The trust named me as trustee. Grandpa Lou insisted, said I was the one who showed up, and it named my mother and my uncle as beneficiaries along with me. The shop itself would be held in trust, the rental income would go toward Grandpa Lou's care, and when he eventually passed, the proceeds from selling the building would be divided among the 3 of us. My uncle signed off on everything, smiled through the whole meeting, shook the attorney's hand. I remember thinking at the time that he seemed unusually agreeable. I filed that thought away and forgot about it for a while. The first thing I noticed was small. Grandpa Lou mentioned almost offhand that my uncle had been helping him update some paperwork. This was about 8 months after the trust was established. I asked what kind of paperwork. Grandpa Lou waved his hand in the way he did when he didn't want to admit he wasn't entirely sure. "The business stuff," he said. "He said you were CC'd. I was not CC'd. I called my uncle. He was breezy about it. Said he'd just helped Grandpa Lou update the contact information on one of the rental leases. No big deal. I let it go, but I wrote down the date and what he said in a notes app on my phone. The second thing was slightly less small. One of the 2nd floor tenants called me. She had my number from when I'd helped Grandpa Lou fix a plumbing issue the previous winter and mentioned that she'd received a new lease renewal to sign. Different letterhead. The landlord listed was an LLC I didn't recognize. I asked her to send me a photo of the document. The LLC was registered to my uncle. I'm going to pause here for a second and tell you what I did not do. I did not call my uncle screaming. I did not go to Grandpa Lou's house and confront anyone. I did not post about it or tell my coworkers or call my mother in a panic at 11 at night. What I did was call an attorney, not the estate attorney who set up the trust. A different one who specialized specifically in elder financial abuse and fiduciary fraud. I found her through a legal aid referral, and she was sharp in the way that people get when they have spent years watching the same patterns repeat. She told me, document everything, touch nothing, and don't let him know you know. So that's what I did for the next 6 weeks. I want to explain what those 6 weeks felt like, because I think people sometimes hear, she waited and gathered evidence, and imagine someone calm and strategic, like a detective in a procedural. That was not my experience. My experience was going to Sunday dinner at Grandpa Lou's and watching my uncle refill his water glass and make him laugh about something on television, and sitting across the table feeling like I had swallowed a stone. It was driving home afterward and crying in a parking lot for 20 minutes before I felt okay to merge onto the highway. It was waking up at 3 in the morning and staring at my bedroom ceiling and doing arithmetic in my head about what exactly my uncle thought he was going to walk away with. I kept making notes. The LLC, the lease renewals. A conversation where Grandpa Lou mentioned my uncle had taken over some of the billing. A month where the rental income that should have been deposited into the trust account was $200 short. Then the following month, $400 short. My attorney filed a records request. What came back was worse than I'd expected. My uncle had, over a period of about 5 months, used a limited power of attorney, one that Grandpa Lou had signed, we believe without fully understanding what he was authorizing, to redirect rental income into an account he controlled. He had also contacted Grandpa Lou's business insurance provider and had himself listed as an authorized representative. The building hadn't been sold, but he had been positioning himself to be the one holding the keys if and when it ever was. My attorney said, "We're ready to move. What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to make sure my grandfather never has to worry about any of this." She said, "Then let's start there. I want to be honest about something. I have a younger sister. I'll call her my sister, who lives about 40 minutes away. She and I are not particularly close. We're different in the ways that people can be different when they grew up in the same house but needed different things from it. She moved out at 18 and didn't look back, and I don't blame her for that. When I told her what was happening, I expected her to be sympathetic, but not particularly useful. What I got instead surprised me. She showed up at my apartment on a Wednesday night with her laptop and a legal pad and a very focused expression. "Tell me everything in order," she said. "Start from the lease." I did. She asked clarifying questions. She was good at following the money in a way that I wasn't, and by the end of the night, she had mapped out a cleaner timeline than the one I'd been keeping in my notes app. She also pointed out a discrepancy I'd missed, a signature date on one of the redirected lease renewals. That was 3 days before the limited power of attorney was even signed, which meant my uncle hadn't just misused the authority. He had forged a document predating the authority he claimed to have. My attorney said, when I showed her, "This is the piece." My sister and I sat on my couch that night after my attorney called, and we were both quiet for a while. "We're not the type of family that does things like this to each other," my sister said finally. I thought about it. "He is," I said. She didn't argue. "Here is what we did, and I want to lay it out clearly because I know from experience that when people hear stories like this, they want to know the mechanics." First, we worked with my attorney and the estate attorney to document every instance of financial redirection. Total amount diverted from the trust, just over $22,000 across 8 months. Second, we worked with the bank to have the trust account secured under dual authorization, meaning no single signatory could move money without written confirmation from me as trustee. Third, my attorney contacted the LLC my uncle had registered and issued a formal cease and desist regarding any lease agreements or representations made on behalf of properties held in trust. Fourth, and this is the part that mattered most to me, we sat down with Grandpa Lou. That conversation was hard. He's 81 years old. He trusted his son. He signed something without fully understanding it because his son handed it to him and said it was routine. He didn't ask questions because, in his experience, family didn't require questions. He sat at his kitchen table and listened to everything, and when we were done, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I wondered why he needed me to sign so many things." That sentence broke something in me a little. "You don't have to sign anything else," I told him. "Not without me or an attorney in the room, and I mean anything." He nodded. He didn't cry. He's not a crying kind of man, but he held my hand for a minute before he let go, and that said enough. My uncle figured out that something had changed when the LLC received the formal legal notice. He called me. I had been coached on this by my attorney. I did not answer the first call. I let it go to voicemail. His message was very calm, almost pleasant, which told me he was calculating. He said he just wanted to connect and make sure we were all on the same page. He said he thought there might be some miscommunication. He said the word family 4 times in a 90-second voicemail. I forwarded the voicemail to my attorney and texted my sister a single word, smooth. She sent back a single word, smooth. She sent back a single word, predictable. I called him back the following day, also as coached. I kept the conversation short. I told him that I was aware of the redirected funds, that I had documentation, and that the trust attorney would be in touch with next steps. I used words like fiduciary breach and fraudulent instrument because my attorney told me to use exactly those words so he would know I wasn't guessing. There was a pause on his end, a long one. Then he said, I was trying to help. Grandpa Lou asked me to manage things. I don't know why you're making this into something it's not. I said, I'll let the attorneys sort that out. Then I said goodbye and ended the call. I sat in my car in the parking lot of my own workplace for about 10 minutes after that. Not crying this time, just breathing. I'd spent 6 weeks being afraid of that phone call and it turned out I could handle it. That felt like something. My uncle hired an attorney. There were several weeks of back and forth correspondence that I mostly experienced as occasional texts from my own attorney that said things like, latest response attached, and nothing unexpected. We're holding firm. I stayed out of it as much as I could. I went to work. I visited Grandpa Lou. I reorganized my kitchen cabinets one weekend because I needed to do something with my hands that wasn't related to any of this. My sister called every few days. She'd ask for an update. I'd give her whatever I had. And then we'd usually end up talking about something else entirely. A show she was watching, a neighbor dispute she thought was funny, a recipe she was trying. It was oddly normal. It felt like we were building a new frequency for talking to each other, one that didn't require a crisis to justify picking up the phone. I think that's one of the things I didn't expect from this whole situation. The legal part settled without going to court. My uncle agreed to repay the full $22,000 plus legal fees to the trust. He was removed as any kind of authorized representative related to Grandpa Lou's estate or affairs. There was an agreement, worked out between the attorneys, that the district attorney would not be contacted as long as full repayment was made within 60 days, and he had no further involvement with trust assets. My attorney asked me if I was comfortable with that resolution. I thought about it for longer than I expected to. Here's the thing about wanting someone to face consequences. I did want that. I won't pretend I didn't spend some nights drafting imaginary confrontations where he sat across from a judge and had to explain himself. I wanted that version of the story. But I also had to think about what putting Grandpa Lou through an extended legal process would cost him at 81 with his heart the way it is. Having to testify, having to relive the part where he signed something his son handed him and didn't ask questions. I decided I wasn't willing to put him through that for the satisfaction of a courtroom moment. I said yes to the settlement. My uncle repaid the money in 2 installments. I know because I watched it come into the trust account and I took screenshots of both deposits. He has not contacted me, my sister, or Grandpa Lou since. Someone is going to read this and say I was too easy on him. Maybe. I've thought about that a lot. I'll probably keep thinking about it. What I know is that Grandpa Lou is still in his house. The rental income goes where it's supposed to go. His care is being paid for. The print shop space is now leased to a woman who runs an alterations business, and she pays on time and sends Grandpa Lou a Christmas card every year, which he keeps on his mantle. I visit twice a week, same as always. Sometimes my sister comes with me. She and Grandpa Lou have figured out a rapport around their shared appreciation for old Western films, which I did not see coming, but which I find genuinely delightful. Last month, Grandpa Lou showed me a photo he dug out of a box. It was from 1991, the year he expanded into the storefront. He's standing in front of the sign. Hand-lettered, he did it himself, with his hands in his pockets, and the particular kind of smile that people have when they've just done something they weren't certain they could do. You remind me of that feeling, he told me. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said, the sign really was good. He laughed. It's a good laugh. I've been collecting it my whole life. I'm not going to wrap this up with a lesson because I don't think that's what it is. It's not a lesson. It's just something that happened to me and my family, and it could happen to yours too. That's the part I want you to actually hear. Elder financial abuse doesn't usually look like a stranger. It looks like someone who knows exactly when your grandfather is tired, and what words make him feel like he's still in charge of things, and how to hand him a pen in a way that feels like help. It looks like someone who came to Sunday dinners. If you're the one who shows up, Who drives to the appointments? Who knows the pharmacist's name? Who sorts the paper samples? I want you to know that showing up actually matters, not just emotionally, legally, and practically. Your presence creates a record. Your attention catches things. Your willingness to make the call, even when it's scary, and even when it's someone you used to call family, is the whole reason the story ends differently. I'm not a hero of this story. I'm just the person who picked up the phone. And I'm really glad I did. I've been thinking about the word entitled a lot lately. Not in the way people throw it around online, like it's just a personality flaw or a generational trait. I mean in the specific, quiet, dangerous way it operates inside families. The way it convinces someone that because they're related to you, they're owed something from you. That proximity is the same as deserving. My uncle didn't wake up one day and decide to become a person who forged documents. That's not how it works. It happened in increments. A borrowed 20 that was never paid back. A favor that got taken a little further than it was offered. A signed paper that he decided not to explain too carefully. Each small thing made the next slightly easier to justify. That's not an excuse. It's just what I think actually happened, and I think understanding it matters more than pretending he was simply a villain who appeared one day with bad intentions. What stopped it wasn't luck. It wasn't some outside force that swooped in. It was attention. Consistent, undramatic, showing up twice a week attention. The kind of attention that notices when the rental deposit is $200 short. The kind that keeps a notes app with dates and exactly what someone said. The kind that makes one phone call to one attorney even when you're not entirely sure you're right, even when a part of you is hoping you're wrong. I think about Grandpa Lou signing that limited power of attorney at his kitchen table. He trusted the person handing him the pen. That trust wasn't weakness. It was the accumulated result of 81 years of living in a way that made trust feel reasonable. The failure wasn't his. The failure belonged entirely to the person who looked at that trust and calculated what it was worth. But here's what I keep coming back to. The calculation was wrong. Not morally, though it was that too, but practically, factually wrong. Because the thing my uncle didn't account for was that someone else was also paying attention. Someone was also keeping notes. Someone had also already made a call. That's the part that actually determines how these stories end. Not whether someone is willing to do something wrong. People are willing to do wrong things all the time. What determines the ending is whether someone else is willing to do the unglamorous, uncomfortable, deeply unsexy work of noticing, documenting, and following through. Of sitting across a table from your grandfather and telling him something hard. Of returning a calculated phone call with your hand shaking and your voice steady. My sister surprised me in this. I want to say that plainly. I had written a version of this story in my head where I handled it alone, where the distance between us was too wide to cross for something like this. I was wrong about that. She showed up with a legal pad on a Wednesday night and found a discrepancy I'd missed, and that discrepancy was the piece that made everything else possible. I don't think I would have gotten there without her. That's also how these things work. You don't have to be the only one paying attention. You just have to be willing to let someone else in when they show up. Grandpa Lou still has his house. The rent still goes where it's supposed to go. The woman downstairs sends him a Christmas card. Those facts exist because of a series of choices, mine, my sister's, my attorney's, that were each individually small and collectively everything. I'm not certain about much, but I'm certain that showing up in the plain literal sense of that phrase is not nothing. It's not even close to nothing. It turns out it might be the whole thing.